Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. We are doing this guidance today on Kata 31 with ZangiefBot here. We are rebroadcasting this, of course, as always, from my personal channel to our main 2_MK Team Twitch channel, and it will be up again later on our YouTube channel, 2-mk.org/YouTube. So, this is another one of our katas, and I need to turn the bot on, I suppose. Based off of our ZangiefBot, which you can find on our website, 2-mk.org/bots. And there are no modifications required to ZangiefBot for this kata.
On Wednesday, just mine here. On Wednesday, we showed off this prototype of the kata, and we used a more perfect version of the bot. Rune Siren has a slightly different version of the bot. It's a little less perfect in its SPD input, which results in more jumping. So part of the reason we are using hers today is to show you that you don't need a perfect input of the ZangiefBot in order to do this kata.
Alright. Which in turn makes it easier for anyone to work with. So, the first step of the kata, and I'll go through its overall purpose a little bit later. The first step of the kata is simply to learn to dash in and not get hit by anything other than jabs. You'll notice that he does an EX SPD, an EX running bear grab. He can do SPDs, he can do a lot of various things. But to start off, just try and dash in, hit with your stand medium punch without getting hit by anything other than one of those light punches that you'll see he sometimes throws. The goal is to not manage to do that. And this will help you set things up for the basis of the rest of the kata. The purpose of the kata is learning to let go of buttons you've pressed mentally so that you can focus on what's coming next and what your opponent is doing. And so the basic action that you need to take is to try to dash up, medium punch, and dash back. Again, without that happening to you, more or less. Anyway. And obviously, as you see, you can end up dashing into quite a few things if you don't have the timing down. So the foundation, the basic, first step of the kata is to try to do that. Dash up, medium punch, immediately dash back. From there, the second step is, once you're have some basic comfort with doing this, you've gotten used to your spacings, both your distances for jumping forward and back, dashing forward and back, what that puts you, the pushback of your medium punch, etc. For instance, I could find out that I am not, in fact, safe if I backdash there if my medium punch came at minimum range, because the stand heavy punch can still hit me with Sakura, who I have not attempted the kata with before, actually. And he can, of course, move himself forward a little bit too. So once you have that first part down, as you can see with Sakura I do not, but we'll be switching soon, and I have a bit more experience on this kata with Kami and Karina. The second step, fundamentally, is that you need to... Now, this is where the kata-based purpose comes in. You need to use the time that that backdash takes to, rather than watching your own character or making sure that, just keeping an eye on yourself, keeping track of what you're doing, and maybe knowing the timing for when you finish backdashing or such things. The goal is to let go of all of that and instead use that time and space to watch your opponent, so you're properly aware of what Zangief does, and you can react immediately at the end of the dash. So the second step of our kata today is actually that. You want to dash back and keep track of what Zangief is doing and respond to it. At this step, you want to learn to whiff punish Zangief or anti-air him if he jumps in. Basically, try to stop what he's doing, but you don't want to get hit by the EX running bear grab that we've seen a few times, which obviously he can come in at you with, and hopefully he'll demonstrate that for you again. Which obviously is not going to be safe for you, almost regardless of your range, if you're too caught up in other things and not able to watch or keep track or react naturally. So like that. You have to get out of it. From there, I don't actually know Sakura's best options for this yet, obviously, as I have not practiced them before just yet. And I have some range things to learn, as you can see. But we're going to switch now here in just one moment to another character that I have a little more experience with in trying out this kata. I've actually tried it before at all. And you can have a look at me, hopefully doing a little better, and we can talk about the next two stages of the kata.
Underground Arena.
Alright, and as you may notice here, that we are using Zangief with V-Trigger 2. This kata we've decided is, in fact, basically necessary. You need to use V-Trigger 2. The first V-Trigger just does not work out very well for it, so you can keep that in mind when setting it up for yourself. While we're on that point, the gauge settings for this kata are your critical gauge is at normal, your V gauge is set to auto-recover, and Zangief has both his critical and V gauge set to maximum start. It's up to you whether you want to have your health gauge at normal or auto-recover. Obviously, it changes the challenge and the mental balance of the effort a little bit, and you can do that based on what you're comfortable with and maybe upgrade as you go through. If you are starting with the auto, change it to normal after you're comfortable with things. So, once you are comfortable with the first step of the kata, the dash in, dash out, and such, and you're starting to learn to whiff punish things, assuming he does anything. second stage is actually dealing with when he doesn't, more or less. You may have noticed that Zangief does not always do something you can with punish or react to. Sometimes he will go back into jabs. Sometimes he will stand still a little bit. Either way, the third step of the kata is that you want to dash back in when that happens and try again as your response. Basically on the same, more or less as fast as possible timing that you were using for all of your other whiff punches. So when he just does his jabs or something, or is going to give you another opportunity, that's the third step. And I'm not as experienced with this. I was practicing with the first two steps, more or less. As you see, he'll sometimes jump, he'll sometimes do that, he'll sometimes stand heavy punch, and you need to, for step 2, deal with all of those. And so depending on your character's options, you may need to dash back in. If he doesn't do anything in particular. Cammy has other options, where she can spiral arrow instead of dashing back in a lot of situations. But that's the basic idea. And so far, throughout all of this, you are not going to generally be worrying too much about whether your stand medium punch that you're using for this actually hits Zangief or not. If it was blocked, if it was hit, either way you're going to be backdashing. The final step of the kata, once you've gotten comfortable with the first two steps, both the first three steps, the dashing, the whiff punishing, and the either dashing back in or using another one of your character's options to respond to those, well, effectively lulls, I suppose you could call them. Which takes a little practice and is my current stage. After you've done all of that, I'm just going to turn the health back on here. After you've done all of that, the next step, the final step for those who are comfortable with everything, is to try and turn that stand medium punch into a hit confirm. If it's blocked, you'll of course want to dash back. And if it's a successful hit, you want to convert it into some form of combo, or possibly into a throw, depending on what your character does. The focus you should be working on at that stage, other than keeping up with all the rest of the kata obviously, is that avoiding autopiloting. Because as you'll notice, if you backdash and you dash back in, you're not always going to be the same spacing as you started. Certainly the stand medium punch, regardless of whether you hit or whether you are blocked, will have a bit of pushback on it. So the ranges can be different depending on what's going on. And you need to focus on getting the hit confirm, obviously, but avoiding autopilot in terms of range and in terms of the simple fact that you don't want to be trying unsafe combos on block.
And of course, more committed combos will obviously do way more damage.
Turn off the gauge meters. And so when you can put that all together, you'll find that you are able to dash in, medium punch, hit confirm off the medium punch, and still be able to backdash. You won't be stuck in either the backdash mindset or flow or the continue combo flow specifically. You will be able to backdash and immediately respond to whatever Zangief does. And basically, you'll have gained a lot of skill with keeping track of your opponent. And not worrying, learning to where you end up, how your moves work, being able to trust those particularly, and just let yourself focus on your opponent, which should help you out of the one-player game that it's very easy to get stuck in as a new player to begin with.
And honestly, the one-player game is not necessarily something unfamiliar to those in higher ranks either. It's more so a state of mind and can leave people stuck in gold and the mid-gold ranks as well.
Yes, the main challenge you're going to be facing, at all layers of the Kata more or less, is that in order to do this correctly, because of the timings Zangief has, you have to, you can't pause and then you can't backdash, finish your backdash, and then look at what he's doing and try to respond to that. You have to manage to react basically on the frame the backdash ends, which means you have to be watching and making your decision during it. So it's very good for helping you let go, and just advance beyond the level of watching yourself. So, in terms of challenges you can face here, and I'm going to be switching over to just fine in a little bit, but first of all, one of the things that you'll notice is that it's I think I was showing it earlier a bit more than that. It's very easy to end up screwing up your timing for when to get in or getting hit by the light punches and such. Now, while the first step of the kata is, in fact, to learn to dash up and not get hit by some of his stronger things, it's not a big deal for this if you are going to be hit by the light punches, more or less, or even possibly occasionally by other things, because the point of the kata isn't necessarily quite to just get in on him, although you need to be able to do that in order to advance to the rest of the stages on the kata. But the point is, in fact, the backdash, the responses you have to that, and all of the later steps more or less. So if you're occasionally getting jabbed and such, you really shouldn't be worrying about that at all. If you get hit by things other than jab on your way into the first dash a little too much, that might be something to focus on just getting used to the timing of, so that you are able to get in the practice of the rest of the content. Again, get myself out of the way. And so as I am demonstrating, one of the other things to come into is that it's very easy to get stuck in autopilot loops as you learn this, where if you have some option that you're used to doing after the backdash, you'll end up trying to do that and probably even doing it at the wrong times, just automatically, because you are still in that state where you need the kata more or less, where you're struggling with the watching and the reaction, since you're either watching yourself dash most likely, or too focused on what you've done rather than what you will be doing, or more specifically what your opponent is doing. And that really is the thing that we're trying to fix and repair. Oops, that was weird.
Much like Kata 22, you can look at player 2's feet and watch for when they're going to... Watch where they are. Are they in the air? Are they starting to head towards you? Is it doing a kicking motion? All that sort of fun stuff. You don't really need to look at most of the other parts of either you or player 2, in this case, ZangiefBot. You know where you are. You're player 1. You're exactly where you put yourself. But Kata 31, like some of our other katas, benefits from that sort of watching of the feet. It helps keep that mind frame of paying attention to what your opponent is doing.
Indeed, and being aware of yourself and trusting that you do in fact know where you are and what you are doing. Because, well, you press the button and you know what the button does. You've been playing the character for more than 10 minutes and such, or you wouldn't need our kata in the first place. Is basically the first step required to getting yourself to, well, to be able to let go of the buttons you're pressing and the outcomes of your buttons in the way we were discussing. Once you trust where you'll end up, it will be a lot easier to not worry about where you're going to be and instead worry about what you're going to do next and what your opponent is doing. So, in just a moment here, we will be handing over to Just Fine, and she will show you some of her characters. I understand that she has practiced this kata with our Mika, and not with Bison, so you'll get to see a bit of each, both in terms of the challenges and experiences that she's had, and another bit of data about learning for the first time. So if you've seen our Wednesday stream, some of this will be a little familiar, and if you haven't, well, now you get a chance to.
Alrighty.
Underground arena.
So, I went over most of this stuff, and I will do a brief review of the more Mika-specific aspects to learning this kata. As well as focusing in on some more generally applicable stuff to characters that are like Mika or have similar options to Mika. So first of all, one of the things that might help you in getting used to this kata, and one of the things that helped me learn, was where to stand against this character. Zangief is a pretty intimidating character and has quite a bit of options to essentially punish you for getting in on him, or trying to. This can cause one to be intimidated by his much longer buttons. Mika, in particular, has very stubby buttons compared to most characters. And if you have specials that you can use at a distance to punish him for whiffs and such, it can be tempting to stand further away from him than you need to. So, what I recommend is you find the range where your dash-in is effective. What effective means depends on your character, of course. In Mika's case, it means that you have the option to mix him up and condition him. So, for instance, you are able to do your stand medium punch with the full punish, since she can't actually do 5 medium punch into heavy punch into Peach at all ranges. And additionally, you'll also want to be in a range where she can throw him as well on dashing in. This means he has 2 different options that he has to think of on your dash in. And in general, this kata is fairly good at helping you learn your multi-threat ranges. What a multi-threat range is basically what I just described. It's being able to have multiple options threaten your opponent from a space. And what you want to do is, obviously, in footsies, you want to maintain those spaces and be aware of when your opponent has more or better options that beat your multiple options. So, in Mika's case, around the range of her light shooting Peach, just a little bit further out, is where she is, or no, medium punch is probably the better one to demonstrate. Around there is where she can do all of these options. It means that she is not really wasting frames in her dash, being close to Zangief. And it also means that she is close enough to do basically all of her throws. So if Mika needs to reposition Zangief, she can throw him with Rainbow Typhoon, or if she wants to keep up better pressure, she can Brimstone, or even her regular throws. So this is just part of step 1 here that Kanzuki Dynasty went over. But especially if you are not used to thinking of your spacing against your opponent this way, I highly recommend seeing how far forward your dash brings you compared to what options are best for pushing there, and if you have any other mix-ups that are useful when using your 5 medium punch. Now, second of all, our Mika is unique compared to some characters and that she has fairly good whiff options from very far away off of her backdash. So for Zangief, depending on the range she pushed Zangief back with her 5 medium punch, if it was on a block, she can slide, she can do her crouching heavy punch, which both hurt her fairly far forward. Additionally, similar to Cammy, she has a far forward moving special move in Shooting Peach, which also has a fairly decent hitbox for hitting Zangief if he went aerially. So she has fairly good options that cover a lot of different situations. Now, when training this kata, you want to be careful about getting too used to the fact that it can cover multiple situations. It's good that you have those options, but it can also lend itself to autopiloting, so you want to be careful about that. Since, in essence, part of the purpose of this kata is to get your mind out of autopiloting as a general thing. So right now, I'm just going to work on that second step. I'm going to do the forward dash, and I'm going to back dash, and I'm going to see what is good at the ranges for Mika. Now, this bot does have fairly decent amount of times where he's not doing much. And this is actually a good thing, because unless you've played against this bot a lot, and the training is fairly fresh in your mind, the times he becomes active can seem a little bit random at first. As I think I've mentioned that was interesting. As I think I've mentioned in the previous stream, this is the sort of kata that is good to do in bursts, since it can be very tiring in terms of the number of decisions you make. And honestly, a lot of muscle memory for situational stuff comes into play once you start understanding what spacings your backdash and forward dash leave you at. So if Zangief is doing nothing, you want to move in. You want to pressure him more. He gave you a turn to move forward. And for a character like Mika, taking advantage of those timings is very important. Now that right there was a bad decision. I essentially dashed forward and went for the throw, when if I had waited a little longer, I would have registered that Zangief was going airborne, and I could have gotten a headbutt air reset, a wingless airplane. If I was very exacting about it, I could even get a Lady Mika. The point is that even though that wasn't necessarily a bad outcome, it still was a bad habit. This is the sort of thing you want to be careful for when training against this. Unlike our bots, this doesn't necessarily have a point system for you to get things right or wrong and have a goal to complete. But there are definitely things to perfect and ways to tell if you are getting better. And that's mostly by paying attention to places where you could have had a better response. If you notice yourself hesitating like that and not dashing forward right away, and Zangief hasn't done anything, you'll want to be careful of something like that as well, because it means that you're trying to mentally confirm if Zangief is doing something. You're essentially hesitating just a little bit and then getting stuck in that position.
Indeed, and that is, in fact, precisely the skill this kata is intended to teach. Being able to let go of your backdash earlier in so that you've already made that decision or done that thinking and confirming when you get there, rather than having to do it right then and losing yourself just a few frames there, which, as anyone with a bit of fighting game experience knows, can be a matter of life and death.
There are moments on your dash back where you can end up getting thrown by his command throws. The reason this happens isn't because he can do that technically, it's because you put in your dash back too late. So if that sort of thing happens, you'll also want to keep track of that, since it might mean you are having something wrong going with either your mental input of the dash or something physical going on. Because it could be that you are pushing the buttons too late and it's not reading as a dash. They're too late apart from each other.
Yes, it is rather important to be able to obviously do the medium punch into dash itself. And so that will be one of the earliest things you are going to have to figure out in the kata, is to try and get the medium punch and then go immediately into the dash without any particular delays. Which is probably relatively simple, but you could end up having the same problems with that as you do with taking the dash into your whip punish or anti-air or whatever else you're doing. And so it's important to make sure that, if you can, you are doing the medium punch into backdash immediately. Because in order to get this right timing-wise and not get clipped by things, for instance, you are going to want to have, at the end of the day, you're going to want to have perfect timing on both the backdash and whatever response you choose to take out of it. Or you're just not going to manage to whip punish Zangief correctly, or he might even catch you on your way back.
Another thing that you'll want to look out for that is actually universal across all characters, and part of the reason why the meter is not full on Zangief's critical art is the EX bear grab and the standard bear grab have fairly different properties in terms of where the hitbox is and where the armor is. And this can change the way your whiff reaction to it is able to affect it. So for example, our Mika can't always slide punish the running bear grab if it's EX. She almost always can if it's not EX. So part of this is meter washing. And that's just another layer that you can add in once you start getting used to the regular whiff punishes that are going on. And as you can see, it can be quite difficult. And this is the sort of kata that you can spend quite a few weeks on because there's so many intricacies in terms of the spacing and different interactions that can occur. So, I think that's enough for Mika. If you want more Mika specific stuff, go to our archives or our YouTube channel, and the Wednesday edition of Sandbag Casuals with the Prototype 31 will have a bunch of stuff that I had digged up to show and explain. So now we are going into a much different situation. We have our charge character here, and as you can imagine, given that a lot of this has to do with dashing, letting go of what you're pressing, all that sort of stuff, for a charge character, some of the rules change about what happens in this kata. So if you are a charge character, you have to have a charge built up to do many of your options. And in order to do a charge, you have to hold down or back. So if you go forward, you lose your charge. Part of becoming a good bison and a good charge character in general is to know when to not charge and to be able to function without having the charge built up and getting yourself back into situations where you can charge and do all of your big damage that you get off of it. Bison is lucky in that he has a lot of decent bread and butter options that don't necessarily require a charge, mostly the one that I've just been demonstrating. But this right here, walking back and forth, not holding down back, not even holding back, keeping a specific distance against Zangief can be extremely uncomfortable if you are not quite a rookie, but are not quite advanced as a charge character. But in order to excel and break the ranks, you'll have to learn to be comfortable with this, because not every scenario is good to have your mobility limited by holding down or holding back. Part of fighting a charge character is also learning about when they don't have that option and learning to use those opportunities to your advantage. Now, Bison has the complicated circumstance compared to almost every other charge character in that his walk speed, as you can see, is not pretty. It is very slow, but for more experienced Bison players, you know that this is a boon to you, and that it allows you to more easily have very technical spacing. And so for Bison players, I will submit to you that it's not so bad to maintain a certain spacing against Zangief and look for your opening to do the dash in into your medium punch. Because you can build charge, and if something happens that is strange, such as the running bear grab that you saw earlier, you can still do Psycho Burst or Scissor Kick and punish that. And you're safe. So you're still at advantage here. The point for step 1 of this kata that you need to learn is when to dash in and at what ranges you end up at when you backdash. Now, unlike our Mika that we previously saw, Bison does not have as big a hit back on his 5 medium punch. And because of that, Bison, unlike a lot of other characters, has a little less variation from that situation alone. Where he dashes in at is a little more heavily important to where he ends up on his dash back. Bison also, interestingly enough, has one of the fastest dashbacks of the game. Animation-wise, he doesn't leave his space until later in the dash, but it's actually a quite quick action. It also doesn't pull you back very much, but it's still fairly quick, and this allows Bison to more quickly react to his opponents after his dash back and take care of instances where they have left themselves still open after your dash back to dash back in and continue to pressure them. There are advantages to this in that, for one thing, it's not something your opponent is going to expect from a Bison. And it allows you to gain a little more control of the rhythm of the match. Because now your opponent has to think, is this guy going to always stay back? When do I need to worry about my charge? And am I even still safe after he dashes back? Because Bison has a lot of far-reaching ways to punish you if you end up whiffing an attack in neutral. As you can see, his 5 heavy punch is fairly long. This slide can reach a very wide part of the screen, and it's a low, so that is an additional factor that your opponent has to worry about. For more intermediate Bison players, this will all sound familiar to you, as it's basically what happens in neutral. And for Bison, the neutral game is still fairly strong after his backdash in this combo. But you still have to learn your options. For Bison, the harder part of this kata is actually the last part of it. So he can spend a lot of time learning what to do after his second dash forward. Because there are ways for a Bison to build up charge through hitting buttons at certain ranges. This is advantageous because it gives you a mix-up. You can hold back during your forward dash, for example, and go into a block string. And then end with a Psycho Burst, or catch them off guard with a scissor kick, whatever you think will end up, or even a devil's reverse or head stomp, whatever you think will throw your opponent off. Knowing the best options for what to do at those ranges can be very useful to learn, and Bison in particular is fairly range dependent on the different strengths of each of those buttons, each of those special attacks. So, just some food for thought for you charge character users. And we are going to switch now to Ibuki, a much bigger change of pace.
Underground arena. Zangief Cyclone!
Indeed, and I'm going to look at some of the challenges that I encounter with Ibuki, who has various different properties than, for instance, Kami and Kareen, who I've practiced this most with, and other such things. Now, going through the katas, Kata again, I have to dash in, medium punch, dash back. However, Ibuki's backdash is relatively slower and shorter feeling than some of the rest. For instance, if I was about here, I have to get out of the front. I could dash in, punch, and dash back, but only at a very specific range where I started before that first dash in. Is the backdash actually going to get me out of the way of things like the stand heavy punch response? And obviously, if I can't get out of the way of something, I'm not going to be able to punish it. Ibuki makes up for this in that she has a decent length of stand medium punch compared to these two, Sakura for instance. But it still does require more precision than people with longer, simpler backdashes like Cammy and Karin in this regard. And so that is obviously a concern to consider. The other thing that I am noting here is that because I didn't actually go into any of the Hadokens that Sakura can obviously do, during our initial explanation of the bot, Ibuki is our first projectile character on screen tonight. Lots of bear grabs. Alright, so but yes, Sakura would in fact have been a projectile character if I had shown off any of that. That, however, will have to be later training. So, the first thing I need to learn with Ibuki, actually, is the range where I can end up that the stand heavy punch is not going to hit me, which is about right here. And so, from there, I need to manage to arrange a backdash so that after the pushback from that stand medium punch, which actually helps quite a lot if you look at it. If I just dash in and dash out, I go effectively nowhere. But because I do have that stand medium punch involved, I'm still able to get away to some degree. Even got able to guard the air out of the corner. But Ibuki can do this. Anyway, so. But the second challenge is that unless he moves forward, as he has been, it takes a little work to sort out the spacings. The other thing that you may have just seen me doing is that after I dashed in, I hit my stand medium punch, I managed to get back out. So far so good. I even managed to see it, he was jumping, and anti-air him with her stand heavy kick. However, at the end of that, I immediately dashed back in, and that got me hurt a little bit. So, you might run into a little bit of autopilot on that front, which you'll need to take care of, simply because it may not be time to start the kata sequence over again just yet, once you've successfully anti-aired or similar. And while you do want to be able to dash in, medium punch, dash out, and respond all at full speed, you can't necessarily stay always acting at full speed in a fight. Sometimes you have to stand still, sometimes you have to walk around or watch for such things. And so, you're going to have to make sure that your autopilot doesn't quite take over in that specific space. There we go, up the corner. And that is something you will get more practice on as you go. And so you see what dashing in for the first time to start the kata on autopilot can run you into. In this case, a charging bear. And so now we see that EXSPD is showing me that, once again, the range I think is safe is not quite, and I need to practice that a little bit more. So it's not happening very much on my ZangiefBot. It might happen a little more on your own personal ZangiefBot, just by minor differences and variances, tolerance in the inputs for the bot. But you're going to get a bunch of these things that show you all sorts of little bits of spacing and really force you to learn, for some characters particularly, such as Goofy in this case, as I'm showing off, exactly where you need to stand for all sorts of things, and where your dashes and buttons and all of your motions get you. For instance, I can't use that anti-air for that. But if I stand any closer so I can do that anti-air, I'm going to get hit by this heavy punch and the EXSPD. So I need to find another option. It's also forcing me to learn in this case that I have the exact range I have to dash in and hit my stand medium punch from basically the max range of the stand medium punch, because I need to be at a particular distance after a relatively short backdash afterwards. But I can't afford to be closer. But if I do manage to dash up and whiff the medium punch, I'm entirely at Zangief's mercy. I can't even go completely under him there if he does that. So. Ibuki seems to add a little bit the extra challenge that it's possible to be a little too quick, it seems like. Which just adds another layer to the responses, since one of the things I need to respond to is actually stay put for slightly longer, rather than immediately pressing a button. But for other things, I will still probably need to. Or, it could be that I just need to use a different button here. which will now help me in Zangief match a little bit more. Since that is armored, this is quite possibly the best time I can imagine to use, rather than this heavy kick. Let's see if I can set it up again for you. To use my metered or even non-metered reversal, because it does go off the ground.
Are you able to Kazakiri through his charge heavy punch too?
I don't know. That might be a mix-up that Ibuki has as an option, is to dash through here and hit him from behind. I can test it out, but I actually just don't know. I suspect it might be a little too short if I'm far enough out that he would whiff it. But the other thing is that this may give me, and I haven't checked with the exact frame timings of everything, of course, since we just came up with this now, but it may give me the opportunity to stay a little closer more often. Since if he has meter, he will occasionally EX SPD me, but if he does not, I might be able to backdash to a range where the stand heavy punch will still hit, and just dodge it. So there's plenty of room to explore your character's individual specific options that you may have for handling various things. And actually, if I did that, it would require even stricter timing, which is certainly not out of line for the kata itself. That might actually make it easier to punish, if I'm a little bit closer, his lariat, since this particular version of it moves him back a little bit. Certainly something to explore, and perhaps some of the more dedicated Ibuki players out here will be able to say immediately, but certainly there are lots of different difficulties or options that you have within this kata based on your character's specific nature and properties, and you should not even slightly be afraid to look at what you can do or experiment with things, since it's not terribly hard to understand the basic idea of the kata, and there are so many options each character has. So with that, we are going to move to our last character for the evening, Karin.
And again, if you're interested in taking a look at this kata yourself, the kata page will be up around this weekend at 2-mk.org/katas.
Underground Arena.
And the ZangiefBot that we've been using for said kata is found at 2-mk.org/bots.
Zangief.
Indeed, and if you want to get an early start, that bot is in fact already up. Alright then, let's have at it. Karin, I do have some practice with this kata on. She obviously has a much better backdash than Ibuki's does, as well as a strong forward dash. And her forward and back dashes, if I can demonstrate them, her forward and back dashes leave her in relatively similar positions. She moves forward a little bit but not a great deal, which is a bit of a contrast to obviously some of the other characters, such as Ibuki's very short backdash and decent forward dash, and all sorts of combinations that are available in the game. So, anyway. Well, each time I change characters, I seem to have to reset myself mentally a little bit. And get myself back to the exact... Some of the corners was on you. Timing at which I can do things. Or do the dash when you start this. So, gotta keep jumping there once I can jump back and he ends up starting one at a time. So, one little detail you can add for yourself that is just managing to see after you've gotten some of the rest of it in, because you don't want to manipulate yourself, is that if you dash in and find out he's charging up that stand heavy punch while you're doing so, you can possibly block instead.
Yeah, so you don't want to get yourself stuck in the situation too often where you need to block the standing heavy punch. But it's still technically part of the spirit of the kata to react to the fact that, oh, I dashed in at the wrong time, and he's about to hit me with that stand heavy punch. If I dash back now, I'm gonna get crush countered. Better block instead.
Indeed, and as you have seen a few times while just fine was talking, there are all sorts of little details that you can end up picking up along the way, in that, for instance, that move is not armored at the very beginning, and I managed to counter it a few times, for instance. Also get to learn that I'm too far away from that range. So yes, looks like I need to refresh myself on step one of the kata a little bit here with Curry. Probably like this. Not quite the correct anti-air response, but that is what the kata is in fact for. Crane has the lovely option of being able to use sweep for lots of things here. But obviously it works out very poorly against an anti-air, so I don't get to simply allow my autopilot to have free reign on the map. For instance, I did not catch that SPD. It's not going to stop my light punch, but of course that's what the next step of the combo is for.
But as you progress in this kata and start learning all of the steps, you can start with punishing a lot of weird things that you may not have expected you could before, either due to your execution or just the fact that now you are able to be aware of when your opponent is doing something in an unsafe space. And you too, through practicing this type of skill and learning all of your options at all of the ranges, can become a sort of wall to opponents who are less experienced. And this is sort of why you get that feeling if you face someone at a much larger level and rank than yourself. It's usually because of that feeling, that they are able to just whiff punish lots of weird things, and any small mistake that you make can be capitalized on. This is technically the type of thing that you are training, and it happens because you are able to sequentially think about what you
about the
are
next
going
thing
to
that's
do.
coming, rather
Exactly.
than being locked into any one particular next thing you're going to do. You're able to think about it while it's going on. Which means you can respond to things that are happening. But yes, overall there really is a lot of spacing to learn, and a lot of things that you can do only if you really are on top of your timing game and are able to react to what your opponent is doing correctly during the dash rather than waiting until after it.
Right, as Rillian is saying, since we don't currently have our comments up, if you have a character with a worse dash, you don't necessarily have to do a dash in as the first step of the kata, since a lot of this is really about the whiff punishing aspect and the sequential clinking aspect.
Right. The backdash is somewhat important to the whole matter because of the way the timing of the backdash works and how you have space to think and predict a whiff punish along with the spacing. But if your character does not have a good forward dash, or you have other things that you want to try, it's not critically important that you use the forward dash to start off. However, it is a good way to get started with the kata. So, given all of that, I think we are about finished for the evening. We've covered everything we intended to. ZangiefBot that you are seeing here that we are playing against is already up on our website, 2-mk.org, and you can go to Bots and ZangiefBot and see everything there. There are no changes to ZangiefBot for this kata, so if you already have ZangiefBot, or if you want to get an early start before the kata is officially released on our website, you can do so immediately with that bot. Otherwise, if you want a little more detail or simply are willing to wait, the kata itself will have a page on our website this Sunday at 2-mk.org/katas. And you can find out all sorts of information there, including more in-depth descriptions, reminder of what each of the steps and stages are, all of the required settings, and everything else you need to get started and get training. Once you've gotten through that, and if you have any questions or just want to talk about anything else that you've come up with in your training, you're free to contact us on our website. There is a contact page as well at 2-mk.org, and we would be more than happy to hear from you if there's anything we can clarify or just say thanks or that was cool. So, all of that given, I hope you all have a very wonderful evening, and enjoy Kata 31 with ZangiefBot next week. So this is Kanzuki Dynasty.
And Just Fine.
Signing off for the evening. Have a good night.